Hi, happy Friday. I know it may not be particularly happy for many of us. However, there are some things that we can be certain about. And what I'd like to share in this video is how the certainty of the fact that we need to eat can become a beautiful place for cultivating awareness and exploration and curiosity that can potentially help us to feel a bit more happy no matter what's going on before, during, after, and around the meal times. So I'm going to share with you a recipe for a ritual that can be taken not just in terms of meal times, but actually to any part of your life where you feel as if you'd like to infuse some more meaning and create some certainty and structure, which can help reduce a lot of stress and anxiety that so many of us are experiencing today. I've been preparing module 3 of the Wellbeing Clubhouse, which is my online portal and community, and it's been really exciting to relook this module. So, the module is around strategic refueling and specifically how we can use ways of eating and approaching how we nourish ourselves in a way to create certainty in our well being and promote longevity and quality of life in the quantity of years that hopefully we'll live because we boost our immunity. And in the research I've been doing and listening to other experts and reading, I came across this saying by Michael Pollan, who's a phenomenal expert in the field of well-being, specifically nutrition. You may have come across his quote of eat real food, not too much, and mostly from plants. And he says that the quality of our meal experience is more important than the quality of our calories. And I found that to be particularly interesting. So, if we think about the quality of our meal experiences, so many of us tend to eat really quickly. We don't give it much thought. We grab quick, convenient choices. We end up having snackcidents and snack amnesia. And so, in the research that I've also been doing for my masterclass that I'm going to be running next week on how we can bring in more ritual, and ritual not being candles and sandals and ceremonial big things, but rather how we can infuse more meaning into day to day things. And what's more fundamental than the meals and the food that we enjoy? It's almost certain that we're going to eat day to day. And a ritual recipe for me can be as simple as 3 steps. There's a point of entry into the ritual, then there's the engagement, where we do an activity that could be particularly mundane or unconscious, like eating or brushing our teeth or making a cup of tea or making our beds. But when we infuse a bit of meaning to it, we create a sense of engagement, enthusiastic engagement, perhaps. And then there's an exit. So there's a beginning, a middle, and a close. And I was thinking how when we eat a meal or even a snack, that there's a start, there's a beginning, there's a middle where we're actually engaging with the food and eating, and then there's an exit as we end. And how we enter meal times can have a huge impact on our experience of the meal and also how much or how little we eat and whether we digest it correctly. So, something I've learned from my French upbringing that I try and put into practice, I don't do this all the time, but is to set up the mealtime. So, even if I'm eating on my own, is to create a little bit of um, savoring opportunity. So, putting out a plate and a knife and a fork, and maybe lighting a candle or pouring a glass of wine to enjoy with the meal or some other beverage, as opposed to just standing in front of the refrigerator or next to the cupboard and just eating mindlessly. So, preparing the entry into the meal. And then, when you're engaging with the meal, the one thing I'd like to recommend is, you know, the banquet is always in the first bite. So, making your first mouthful really mindful and savoring it rather than just wolfing it down. And my video last week, Friday, which if you missed, feel free to watch, where I spoke about the concept of eating until you're 80% full as opposed to overfull, is not just common in the Japanese culture, which I refer to, but in many, the German, the French, the Italians. I know in French, what what came to my awareness this week is when we say we're hungry in French, we say j'ai faim. And then once you've eaten, you don't say I'm full. You say je n'ai plus faim. I am no longer hungry. Isn't that interesting? So are you eating until you're full or potentially stuffed? Or do you eat until the hunger has gone away? Because there's some real virtue and value in doing that. However, it's really hard to do that if you've got no kind of presence or meaning around or your meal times and just kind of eating mindlessly. Uh, and then what's important is that third ingredient when we're creating ritual is the exit or the close. So when you're finishing a meal or a snack, is do you just kind of carry on with whatever you were doing, potentially being distracted by work, or is there a point of almost gratitude? You know, many of us say grace before a meal. What I'm going to try and do, which I've never done before, is to almost acknowledge my meal and express gratitude or a grace, if you would, at the end of the meal, to acknowledge that I've done that now and I've fed myself. And why is this important? I don't know. I think I have often struggled with endings. I'm very quick at rushing into the next thing because I enjoy the excitement and aliveness of spring and summer and the beginning of activities. And then once they're done, it's like, okay, done that. And I guess that's because one of my saboteurs is being a high achiever and always wanting to achieve things. So it's easy to just move on and not allow things to settle. So the season of autumn and fall reminds us that there's a pause before the winter, right? And now, with the second lockdown going on for many of us, it's almost this forced pause. So, will you pause? And it's hard to pause in the big things if we're not pausing in the small things. And do we get much smaller than a meal time? I guess we do. I guess the breath is probably the smallest pause. So, wow, that's a whole different conversation is are you conscious of the beginning, the middle, and the ending of your breath? And maybe it's as small as or as simple as that, as at the end of your meal, taking one mindful breath. And then moving on. So, if you're curious about this recipe of ritual and you'd like to explore this more with me, because I'm learning as I go along and the wisdom is always in the room, I don't have all the answers. I just know that the stuff works. It makes it different. It helps me create a sense of joie de vivre and keep a sense of effervescence and aliveness in my body, in my soul, in my mind, in my heart. Even in those moments where it's dark and I feel flat and I'm engaged, but I'm exhausted. You know, I'm dedicated, but I'm depleted. And ritual, I really find, is helping me enormously at this time. So I'd love to know what you think about this. How do you make your meal times more meaningful? Is there something that you do at the beginning of your meal time? How do you slow down your meal times to savor them more so that you get to a point where je n'ai plus faim? You're no longer hungry as opposed to stuffed or overfull. And how do you exit your meal times so that there's a sense of honoring and gratitude rather than distraction? Thank you for joining me today, and I hope to see you at the masterclass next week if you're interested in finding out about ritual recipes and how they can extend to more areas than just your meal times. Enjoy your meals over the weekend. À la prochaine.